family or hell? A mother-in-law's scheme and the other woman, a betrayed trust. The lively sounds of the wedding echoed throughout the hall. The cheerful chatter of relatives from both families made the atmosphere even more festive. Lan, the new bride, gracefully stepped into her husband's home. Her crimson dye flowing with each cautious step. Her delicate hands clutched the fabric lightly. Her heart pounding with anxiety. She tried to push away her worries, telling herself that as long as she was sincere, everything would be fine. Mrs. Knock stood in the middle of the house, scrutinizing every detail of Lan's face, from her neatly tied hair to her slightly flushed cheeks, and finally resting on her small hands. Her voice was a mix of commentary and veiled sarcasm. Her family's been struggling for a while now. I wonder if she can even take care of Dũng properly. The words were soft, but they cut through Lan like a sharp blade. She clenched her hands tighter, swallowing her feelings. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She couldn't let herself cry. Sensing the tension, Dũng, her husband, wrapped his arm protectively around her shoulder. His voice was filled with love and reassurance. Dũng, cheerful but firm, Mom, Lan is the woman I love. You don't have to worry. Mrs. Knock shot her son a look of discontent. But instead of arguing, she simply let out a cold chuckle and turned away without another word. Dũng sighed and squeezed Lan's hand tighter. She understood, this was just the beginning. A stormy beginning? Lan jolted in surprise. The petite young woman lowered her head, trying her best to endure. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Mrs. Knock stormed in like a raging whirlwind, her face flushed with fury. Shattered porcelain pieces were scattered across the floor, soup spilling everywhere. At that moment, Lan felt as if her heart had plummeted into an abyss. Mrs. Knock, shouting, "What kind of mess is this? And you think you can take care of your husband like this?" Lan panicked and immediately knelt down to clean up the broken pieces. Her hands trembled, and in her haste, she accidentally cut her finger on a sharp shard. Bright red blood dripped onto the cold floor. The stinging pain shot through her, but it was nothing compared to the cruel words piercing her ears. Lan, voice trembling, I didn't mean to. Mrs. Knock, scoffing, voice full of disdain, didn't mean to? You're completely useless. If you can't even handle basic kitchen work, how do you expect to take care of this household? If your husband ever goes hungry, it'll be all your fault. Lan lowered her head, her eyes welling with tears. But she forced herself to hold them back. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to confront Mrs. Knock. But her heart felt suffocated. The older woman was relentless, turning her life into a living hell. The mother-in-law's scheme, when the other woman appears. It was a gloomy day. Heavy gray clouds blanketed the sky, as if foreshadowing an ominous event. Dũng had been away on a business trip for several days, leaving only Lan and Mrs. Knock at home. Without her husband around, the atmosphere grew even heavier. She felt like prey, left alone in a predator's domain. Suddenly, the iron gate creaked open. A sweet yet suggestive voice rang out. "Vy, Auntie, I brought you some gifts. Since you're home alone, I thought I'd drop by to keep you company." Hearing V's voice, Mrs. Knock immediately stepped out, her face lighting up with joy. It was a stark contrast to how she treated Lan, this time. She was warm and welcoming. "Mrs. Knock. Oh, my dear girl, if only you had been my daughter-in-law instead." Vy smiled coyly, handing over the gift box to Mrs. Knock. But her gaze quickly darted toward Lan, who was standing in the kitchen. Her eyes carried a hidden meaning. She wasn't just here for a casual visit. A shiver ran down Lan's spine. She knew Vy was Dung's ex-girlfriend. But lately, Vy had been unusually close to Mrs. Knock, a woman from the past, suddenly making her way back into this household. Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something more sinister behind it? Lan, polite but distant, "Hello. Vy, it's been a while." Vy, pretending to be cheerful. But her gaze sharp. "Lan, you look so pale these days. You must be working really hard at home." "Huh?" Lan gave a faint smile. She knew all too well, that wasn't a casual remark. It was a veiled insult. Before Lan could respond, Mrs. Knock spoke up, her voice dripping with affection toward Vy. "Mrs. Knock, come inside. Dear, I just made some delicious tea. I was feeling a little lonely today. But having you here makes me so happy." VY flashed a charming smile and confidently walked into the house, not even sparing Lan a glance. Lan let out a quiet sigh. She had a bad feeling about this. V's return wasn't just a coincidence. This was only the beginning of something much bigger. The mother-in-law's plan, when the daughter-in-law reaches the peak of conflict. The evening sun burned red, painting the sky with an ominous orange hue. From afar, the familiar sound of Dung's motorcycle echoed. After long days of loneliness and enduring her mother-in-law's cruelty, Lan's husband had finally returned. She hurried outside, her eyes filled with joy. Lan, excited, voice trembling with emotion, "Dung, you're home." But contrary to her expectations, Dung did not smile. He did not open his arms to embrace her as he usually did. His gaze was cold, and in his hands, he tightly gripped a stack of photographs. As Lan reached out to touch his arm, he pulled away, stepping back. A sense of unease rose in Lan's heart. A gust of wind blew, scattering a few of the photos onto the ground. "Dung," his voice low and sharp, eyes filled with anger. "Lan, what is this?" He held up the photographs before her. Lan's eyes widened in shock. The pictures showed her with a strange man. The angles made them look incredibly intimate, as if they were having an affair. Her ears buzzed, and her hands turned cold. Lan, stunned, voice shaking, "What? No, this can't be." From inside the house, Mrs. Knox stepped out. Her face was full of sorrow. But deep in her eyes, a victorious glint flickered. She sighed and wiped her tears away, though the corners of her lips curled slightly. Mrs. Knock, bitterly, dramatically, "I told you. My son, she is not worthy of you. I have suspected her for a long time. You work so hard while she goes out, fooling around with other men." Lan stood frozen, her hands trembling as she picked up each photo, examining them closely. This was clearly a setup. That day, she had simply gone to the market and happened to run into an old coworker. They had only exchanged a few words. Yet somehow, those casual moments had been turned into evidence of infidelity. A sharp pain pierced through her chest, making her stagger and grip the doorframe to stay upright. She struggled to breathe, clenching her lips. She hugged her coat tightly, trying to remain calm. Lan, choking up, trying to explain, voice breaking, "Dung, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything wrong." Dung, furious, his eyes darkening, "A misunderstanding? Look at these photos. How can you call this a misunderstanding? Or are you saying that my mother made this up? That she lied just to hurt you?" Lan froze. She looked into her husband's eyes, the man who had once loved her deeply, but now no longer trusted her. She turned to Mrs. Knock, the mother-in-law who had always tried to suppress her. Then her gaze landed on VY, who was standing behind the door with a sly smile. VY pressed her lips together, a flicker of satisfaction crossing her face as things unfolded exactly as she had planned. Lan knew this was no coincidence. This was a scheme, a carefully orchestrated plan to break apart her family. But she had no proof. Mrs. Knox stepped forward, grabbing her son's hand. Her voice was full of sorrow, but her eyes gleamed with cold calculation. Mrs. Knock, pretending to be heartbroken, placing a hand on her chest, "Oh my dear son, I raised you for so many years. Only for you to be deceived by this woman? You have to wake up." Dung clenched his fists tightly. He loved Lan, but the photos, his mother's words, everything was dragging him into a whirlpool of doubt. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, but uncertainty filled his heart. Lan looked at her husband, silent tears streaming down her face. Desperation consumed her. She knew that if she couldn't prove the truth, this marriage would be beyond saving. But right now, even Dung was standing against her. She was completely alone. Suddenly, VY slowly stepped out from the shadows. Her expression was neutral, but a glimmer of amusement flickered in her eyes. Casually, she let a photo slip from her fingers, right in front of Lan's feet. Lan bent down to pick it up, and suddenly noticed a crucial detail. In the reflection captured in the photo, there was someone else. It was VY. Lan stared directly at VY, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "Lan." "VY, why were you there? Explain yourself." VY flinched for a split second but quickly regained her composure. She crossed her arms and smirked. "VY, oh, I just happened to pass by. But I saw everything clearly. Stop trying to deny it. Everything is obvious. Mrs. Knock nodded vigorously and immediately chimed in. Mrs. Knock, did you hear that? Dũng, even VY saw it. This woman has no excuse left. Lan clenched the photo in her hands, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe she had just found the key to turning the situation around. She quickly unlocked her phone and rewound the security camera footage. On the screen, a crystal clear image appeared. VY sneaking into Dung's room and placing the incriminating photos inside. The truth was undeniable now. There was no way VY could continue her deception any longer. But Dung's younger brother and the only one who believed in Lan, refused to let things end like this. He was suspicious about the photos themselves. Frowning, full of doubt, Sister Lan. Something doesn't feel right. These photos, they don't look like random snapshots. The angles, the lighting, it's like someone carefully staged them to frame you. Lan turned to look at a fragile glimmer of hope in her eyes. For the first time, someone was openly taking her side. Lan, her voice choking. But how do we prove it? Dũng stepped forward, his voice cold but filled with deep disappointment. Dũng. Mother, have you ever thought about my feelings? About how much I loved Lan? How much I trusted you? And yet, you were the one who destroyed everything. Madame Knock choked on her words, tears starting to well up. But this time, those tears could no longer soften Dung's heart. VY turned pale, unable to look anyone in the eye. In the end, she lowered her head, knowing she had completely lost. Lan looked at Dũng, her voice soft but resolute. Dũng, now that you've seen the truth, can you still trust me? Dũng gazed deeply into her eyes. Where pain and sorrow lingered, wounds he himself had inflicted. He took a hesitant step closer, his trembling hand reaching out to her but stopping midway. He knew he had made a mistake, and the price for that mistake might just be losing the woman he loved the most. Madame Knock was now nothing more than a selfish woman, willing to destroy her son's family because of her own prejudices. Dũng, his voice low and cold, I once thought that no matter what, you would always be my mother. But today, you've destroyed everything. Madame Knock trembled, silent tears streaming down her face. But no one cared anymore. Dũng slowly turned to Lan, his eyes filled with sorrow. He wanted to step closer to her, but his legs felt as if they were rooted to the ground. Dũng, his voice hoarse, full of regret, Lan? I'm sorry, I didn't trust you. Lan stood still, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. But this time, they were no longer tears of grief, but of liberation. Her eyes no longer held resentment or pain, only deep exhaustion. Lan, smiling bitterly, her voice as light as the wind, now that you believe me, does it even matter anymore? Dũng froze. He understood, once trust was shattered, it was nearly impossible to piece it back together. As for Lan, even though the truth had been revealed, she knew the wounds in her heart would never truly heal. Their marriage, could it still be saved? That morning, the sky was gray, as if foreshadowing an inevitable ending. Lan stood at the door, gripping the handle of her suitcase. Her heart felt heavy, but her eyes shone with determination. She had endured enough, and now, she needed to walk away, even though she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Behind her, Dũng stood silently, his gaze filled with confusion and despair. The woman he loved most was turning her back on him, and this time, she might never return. Dũng, his voice pleading, full of pain, Lan, don't go, I was wrong, I'll move out with you. We can start over, can't we? Lan paused. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Dung's voice was full of sincerity, full of regret, but some things, once lost, can never be restored. Lan, sadly, her voice as light as the wind, it's too late. When trust is lost, love can never be the same again. She turned back to look at Dũng one last time. He stood there, his eyes filled with sorrow. But she knew, love could not survive on regret alone. She had suffered too much, and now it was time to free herself. Inside the house, Mrs. Knock stood frozen, her eyes following her daughter-in-law. Her trembling hands clutched the doorframe. In her heart was regret, guilt, and an empty void she could not name. She had never imagined that her actions would push her family to this breaking point. But now, no matter how much she regretted it, it was far too late. Dũng remained standing in place, silently watching as Lan's figure faded into the distance. A cold wind blew through, carrying the breath of loneliness. He knew, this time, he had truly lost her. His voice was sincere, filled with remorse. But some things, once broken, can never be the same again. Lan, sadly, her voice as light as the wind. It's too late now. When trust is lost, love can never be the same again. She turned back to look at Dũng one last time. He stood there, his eyes filled with despair. But Lan knew, love could not survive on regret alone. She had endured too much. And now it was time to free herself. Inside the house, Mrs. Knox stood frozen, watching her daughter-in-law walk away. Her trembling hands gripped the doorframe tightly. In her heart, there was regret, guilt, and an indescribable emptiness. She had never imagined that her actions would tear her family apart like this. But now, no amount of remorse could change what had happened. Dũng remained where he was, silently watching as Lan's figure faded into the distance. A cold wind blew past, carrying away the last traces of warmth. He knew, this time, he had truly lost her. This story is not just a tragedy of a broken marriage but also a reminder of the value of trust and love. When doubt seeps into the heart, it can destroy even the strongest relationships. Lan did not leave because she stopped loving Dũng, but because she understood that love without trust cannot last. Key lessons from this story. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. Once lost, it is difficult to restore completely. Regret often comes too late. When you realize someone's worth, they may no longer be there waiting for you. Manipulation by a third party can destroy a family's happiness. Always be aware of the words and actions of those around you. Do you think Lan made the right decision to leave? What would you do in her situation? If you were Dũng, what would you do to save the marriage? Do you think there is a way to fix everything? Have you ever experienced a similar situation in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Leave a comment and subscribe to support our channel.